Hello, everybody. It's Thorfinn here, and today, what I want to do is sort of demonstrate how I would play Vyse on Abyss. Right? I almost said the opposite, like isses and ices. That would have been bad. Um, so essentially, what I've kind of seen throughout people, right, is saying that Vyse isn't that good of an agent. I think realistically, right, agents can look really bad in this game. My kind of thought with Valorant and how the gameplay cycle is it's really easy to look like a bot. Like I think you can look like a bot even if you're like the greatest player in the world, right? So I would take what your teammates in ranked are doing with a grain of salt and kind of wait until you watch like people who actually like have played Vyse and kind of developed her kit. So the first thing that I want to talk about here is over towards this A bomb site, right? A wall that I think is really good is going to be a wall like this, for example, right? This wall is really deep, and when it pops up, it blocks off this A main space. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, it lets them walk across the bridge, and to that I say it lets them walk across the bridge. Scaling and pathing this A bomb site towards the bridge here on Abyss is fucking miserable, right? If you have like an Astra, for example, they can suck this guy off. Like, pause. That you know, if you have like a stun or like an aftershock or you know whatever, it's just really hard to like dodge utility because this bridge is so small, right? And another thing that this wall does is once someone gets into the bomb site here, it permanently, well not permanently, but for pretty much the rest of the site hit, it lasts a very long duration. It's going to block off these guys, right? So because it blocks off these A main guys, essentially what this does is isolate a fight, which I think is what Vyse is going to be really good at, right? I think you're going to see a lot of really mechanically gifted sentinels like Tex, Alfair, and others, right? Sort of utilize this idea, right? Where they make setups to isolate the duelist or isolate the entry specifically, right? With this, maybe put like a flash like right here, pop the flash, and then fight this guy without having to worry about a main, right? Another really good wall that I think is really good is this, right? I think this wall, it's pretty much the same purpose, except one thing that it does, right, is it lets them plant here, but it doesn't let them plant here, right? So it lets them plant here, which is not necessarily a good thing, which is why I sort of found this adaptation for a different wall that essentially does the same thing. Obviously, if you swing wide enough, you can get shot from here, right? But if you're swinging out like this, you should be perfectly fine. Another thing that you can do is throw the wall like this as well if you really wanted to, where essentially what this would do is allow them to plant front sight, and then it would block off anyone pathing here. So you'd play sort of a very like passive CT approach. You'd pop a flash right here and take the fight and basically flood out, right? I think that's what you need to understand, right? If you're by yourself, putting this isolated 1v1 wall is not that great, right? But if you're by yourself and you're putting these really deep walls that allow you to maintain backside control or at least have info on backside, it can really help you just fast flood retake a round, right? Okay, so over towards mid, I think Vyse is not necessarily the greatest, right? But I think that what you can do here is pretty special. So first of all, you can pop this flash right here for information. It gets this, it gets that, right? And you can do this fairly aggressively, right? But as you can see, it's not that big of a range. So you can't, oh, okay, alrighty, whoa, okay. So you can't like, you have to go all the way up here, right? So unless it's smoked, it's pretty dangerous. But you can just throw that right there and get information. And then, you know, you have to be pretty close. Pick it back up. Boom, there you go, right? Most of the time they'll shoot it, but it's still just information, right? Which I think is what a lot of people are going to start using this as, right? Vyse is basically a pseudo-initiator rather than a sentinel. It's kind of how you have to think about how to use her kit, right? Also, just like going on each map and finding flashes, right? I think like this is probably my favorite flash to throw. Throwing it like up and through this is really good because it flashes this guy off, it flashes the close guys and things of that nature, right? You can also run up, you can flash through the library, right? Sometimes it pops really weirdly, which is pretty funny, but all right. Next, going over towards this B bomb site, gonna kind of show you some walls, right? So on the B bomb site, there is like this wall, which I really like a lot because it gives you a lot of space, right? One thing that it doesn't do, right, is it doesn't deny this plant. So one thing that I think you could do is more so throw the wall like this, because essentially if they plant here, they're planting with you just being able to kill them. Always being able to... I think the greatest thing about this wall is that it denies the safest plant, right? You could put it on top of the safest plant and not allow them to plant there, which I think is a really special thing, right? Or you could put it above the safest plant spot, like I'm doing here, basically, where, yeah, they can come in and they can plant, and, you know, this isn't necessarily the safest plant on this bomb site, but it's the best plant, right? And you can really just deny them of that in general. Now, if you want to just sort of hold this heaven, this hell position and play retake, I would throw the wall here and then kind of throw, like, have like a passive, like, flash, like, right here. And, you know, they can't see it until it starts popping and winding up. So basically, you can sit here, you wait, you see that the wall pops, you pop a flash, and then you just fight into here, you kill that guy, and then you just wait for the retake, right? Now, unfortunately, the walls here aren't that great, right? Like if you throw a wall like this, it lets them cross back sight, and so on, right? But I do, I can see how this wall might be useful, but it's a very like, oh, like this, like I know these guys are going to like not go here, but they're gonna path this way. So if I can just lock that guy in and just, you know, win this 1v1, right? I could potentially get here and wrap, right? Or I could just sit back sight and just wait. I could kill this guy and have time to pop my ult, like stuff like that, right? But I think realistically it's not going to be that efficient. Other walls that I think like are kind of mid, right, is something like this, right? Realistically, you just do this. But that's kind of it for like the setups, right? And obviously, like for these razor vines, it's really kind of dependent up to you, right? Like wherever you're fighting, like throwing this like right here, for example, is really good. Throwing it right here on this corner, basically places where they can swing you, right? So, you know, boom, the wall pops, you detonate both, you swing this guy who's taking damage in the razor vines. He's super slow, so you're kind of mitigating, you're potentially also mitigating like ping advantage, right? Like whenever someone swings you, they have the advantage because you're just playing online, and that's really just how online games work, right? So because of that, the slower that they go, the less that advantage is, right? So if they're going through a slow and they're peeking you, you can actually hold angles, not, you know, perfectly like you would be on land, but still a lot better than usual, right? Just a little bit more in your favor. So kind of pretty simple. The main thing about Vyse setups are specifically how you want to use these walls here, right? But I mean, you can get away with throwing a razor vine right here, right? Throw a flash here. I think the best flash that I've kind of thought of on this bomb site is something like this, right? Something super high when you're fighting to the right. The thing is that it doesn't hit left. So potentially what you could do is maybe throw like the flash like right here. Probably is going to be your best bet. One thing that I think that they, if you throw it right there, it's gonna hit the whole site. So that's gonna be your best flash here for Vyse, is just right there. It hits everything, and it's going to blind them. Obviously, one thing to note: if they're all the way down here, if they're like this, right, they're probably going to be able to dodge it. If you put it like right here, it's probably going to be exactly where you need to throw it in order for it to be like a god flash in quotations. But also, like, just remember with flashes, the farther they are away, the less blind that they are, right? So if they're super far away and they get blinded here, they're not going to be as flashed as if they were up here, for example. So make sure you angle out and take your fights accordingly. Now, on attack, I think Vyse raises a pretty interesting kind of idea, right? Obviously, you could do like these info flashes, right? I think the best one here would be something like this, potentially. You'd want to kind of throw it higher, but like the way that it's clipping through here, it doesn't really allow that. Probably something more so along the lines of this flash would be pretty solid, because you can get, You can get heaven, you can get here, you can get here, you know, things like that, right? Pretty hard to clear this back sight, but one thing you can do is throw razor vines to just help your teammates who might get swung by this guy. As you can see, it's a pretty big radius. It, you know, hits the entirety of that, right? But the main thing you're going to see with Vyse is using a lot of her utility, more specifically towards post plant, right? One thing that you can do is use like a Vyse wall like this, right? This is, throw it a little bit deeper, right? Because it's going to give you just a little bit more time to react and just pre-fire this guy who's crossing it, things like that, right? Putting a flash like right here, for example, would probably be the God Flash for like the retake, right? Because if you're just sitting here, right, you whoop, okay, I kind of fucked that up, but whoop, pew, the flash goes off. You can swing heaven. You can swing this guy jumping up library, like things like that, right? So one wall, right, would be like right here. Another wall would be right here, because forcing them to jump up and over is always going to be really good. Forcing people to jump is something that a lot of people really don't think about, but it gives you an advantage, right? Because they're just not able to shoot you. Like another thing that I think would be really good, right, is if you have like the bomb right here, putting the wall on the bomb, right? So if you have the bomb is planted right here, you pop this, and what it will do is if they try to stick it, it'll pop them up, so they have to go up and then start to stick it. And essentially, if their teammates are behind that wall, guess what? Another thing that I said earlier, just a free 1v1, right? That's really all. That is like the basis of Vyse's kit. Okay, now towards this middle position, one thing that you can do with the flash, pretty simple, boom, pop for info, right? It's gonna flash anyone holding, anyone that can see this, right? It doesn't get all the way over here, right? You could probably make the adjustment to kind of send it over towards the right. But again, like the main thing is just finding like exactly where you need to throw the flash in order for it to hit everything. And on this middle position, that's going to be fairly difficult, right? So always, like with a flash that can give you information, don't always take no information as a solid no, right? You should always sort of think that they can be there, that they can make the play to timing it and things like that, and always just be ready for a fight at all times. Towards this A, one thing that I seen was pretty effective is just denying them to being able to flat out heaven. Isolating this heaven guy is just really important, right, on the drop. Another thing that another way is like throwing deep here and isolating this guy, right? Also by putting like a flash right here, right? You can basically just sit here, hide. Ooh, my trip goes off, pop flash, swing, right? Pretty simple. Playing off your utility, very fundamental sentinel stuff. Again, right, if the bomb is planted here, what you could do is you could throw the wall like this, like so. This should force them like right here to defuse. And again, that's really good, right? That's super good. It's just a lot easier to spam a guy who's stuck right here than who could go right here and here, right? Smaller distance, easier to kill, fairly simple. Now, one thing that I want to talk about quickly is the ultimate, right? So you have to use this ultimate on a gun round in comparison to most other ultimates. I am a big fan, in general, of popping ultimates on eco rounds or force buys in order to win rounds and to give you an advantage, right? So I think if you're forcing into a team that has guns, that's a really effective strategy with Vyse, right? Now, personally, I think that this is especially good for like denying a post plant, right? Like for example, at a post plant, you're all the way up here, right? You could walk all the way over here, so you get the maximum distance on this bad boy, and you pop it, and anyone in that circle is going to not have a primary weapon, so they're going to have to run all the way over here. In ranked, this is when your Neon ult is going to get ripped by the other team, your Jet ult, your Raze ult, you know, your Chamber op, your Chamber Deagles can get whipped out, right? So you have to be prepared for those instances, but most of the time, right, these guys aren't going to have a primary weapon. So that's like a super, it's a really like gimmicky ult for sure, because you have to use it on specific rounds. You have to understand like the team's economy and things like that, right? But it's pretty basic. How I would ult here towards this B site is literally just go hell and then to rip that shit, right? As you can see, like getting into these super deep post plant positions and popping your ult is going to be how you want to use it, right? Not necessarily for a site hit. And the reason why is because if we go all the way towards B main here, I'm going to kind of show you the radius, right? If you get here, right, they can still live here. They can go heaven. Like, they can very easily get out of it, right? Because watch, we're going to watch the wind-up time. Now they have no guns, right? Very long wind-up time. So by disrupting them, right, and popping it like here, for example, and then just running away so they can't kill you, bada bing, bada fucking boom, all right? That's kind of how I think you need to use the Vyse ultimate. Not necessarily on hits, but on post plants. And I think, realistically, right, like, I think definitely the Riot devs had a very clear image of Vyse. Vyse is really good at just soloing out duelists and sort of preventing dive, right, which I think is really, like, the one thing that makes this game attacker-sided, right? Pretty much every map in the pool is attack sided, right? Especially with not necessarily split, but specifically with Pearl coming back, right? Like Pearl was like giga attack sided because of just how the map is designed, right? So they kind of have made this agent that is really good at isolating dive duelists, which is part of the reason why this game is very skewed attack sided, right? Having someone that's able to completely just run through utility and not worry about it is really fucking good, right? Like Neon, Raze, Jet, Yoru, like just being able to pass something to utility is really good. I still think that Vyse could definitely use buffs, right? I think that the wall specifically doesn't really need to change, but I think, you know, her razor wires and her flash could definitely be tuned a little bit towards the higher side, right? Now, a lot of people will probably say that I'm kind of like bugging or whatever about that, but I think, honestly, the only thing that I think could really use a buff is the razor wire. I think it needs to slow you down more, right? Slow it down more, and then maybe if, you know, you're thinking, oh, well, they're going to take more damage if they're slow, do we want, like, the base damage of the razor wire to be, like, the same? Then just lower the damage and then increase the slow, right? I think that would be a really good change. But I think that Vyse is going to be a very, like, niche Sentinel because it's not a traditional Sentinel, right? It's not your Cypher. It's not your Killjoy, right? It requires you to do more work. And it's the way the maps are designed that really makes this, like, work, right? Like, one of the big things in Valorant is a lot of players don't like putting a player like towards mid to hold it, right? And the way that mids work, they're not very like open, right? They're very like condensed, so it makes it harder to like play towards mid. Like, for example, right, like, yeah, you can hold like this angle here, right? And then you can hold this angle here, but it's really hard to like double fight an angle, right? Unless they go out really wide. So it kind of makes teams not really want to like double play towards mid, which is like a lot of like traditional attack FPS is kind of how it goes, where you'd sort of play like two towards mid, and then you'd play like one guy like sort of playing retake or like anchoring a bomb site, which again, in this game, it's really hard to anchor because all of the bomb sites are really small. And because they're really small, they get cleared out with utility like extremely easily. Like, it's just really hard. I think Ascent is really the only bomb sites that have like enough depth, right? Like, if you look at the A bomb site, right, like the depth of this bomb site is, oh, it has a bridge and it has a box. That's the only things that really matter on this bomb site, right? This gets cleared out with a single piece of utility, right? Like, look at how big this space is, and it just gets cleared out by an open flash or a breach stun, right? Like, it's insane, right? Like, bomb sites are really small, and it's the same thing over towards B, right? Like, the depth of this bomb site is it has a jump up, and then it has a box, and that's it, right? Like, So the main thing that I think that this does is mainly just prevent dive duelists from being able to just dash in and live. Um, yeah, just honestly with Vyse, my main sort of thing is don't be afraid to take your ones and just fucking swing over here. If they trip, bro, if you throw a wall like this, right, and they trip the wall, you pop your flash and you swing this guy. Don't give a fuck, okay? Because if you give a fuck and you try to play like super tactical, you try to play like your Cypher, you try to play like your Killjoy, and you try to like, not take like 1v1s and things like that, right? You're not going to be a good Vyse player. The key, pretty much entire identity of this agent is taking 1v1s. So you need to take your ones in order to be effective. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want more. And of course, follow me on Twitch if you want to see me play Vyse in ranked and grind and grind and grind like I always do. I will see you all later. Peace.